Hello, my name is Ariadna Keane and I'm one of the arts teachers at the college. Welcome to week 3 of Australian Politics and Active Citizenship. This week we are going to focus on political parties. In order to understand what they are and why they believe in what they do, we need to first understand where they sit on what we refer to as the political spectrum. So what is meant by the political spectrum? The political spectrum is a way of characterising different political positions in relation to one another. You've probably heard of the phrases right-wing and left-wing before. These are broad terms to describe opposing ideologies. Left-wing ideologies refer to more socialist ideas of equality and social reform. We're talking liberal or progressive thinking here. So left-wing parties would generally be in favour of gay marriage, abortion rights, and an increase of refugees in Australia. Parties that would be considered left-wing are those who are synonymous with the sentiment of for the people, by the people. They represent ideas of working for the common good and funding public institutions over private ones to ensure that everyone in society is looked after. Achieving greater social equality and supporting local industries underpins some of the policy making of left-wing political parties. Conversely, right-wing ideologies centre around capitalism. These are very much tied to the economy and the advancement of the individual, not so much the community. Right-wing parties are also typically characterised by more conservative or traditional values. So these might be pro-nationalism, anti-immigration parties. Pro-life, anti-abortion, you get the picture. The sentiment here would be more every man for himself. Parties that fall into the right-wing camp are interested in the privatisation of institutions, making these accessible only to those who can afford them. Rather than working towards social equality, you'll note the emphasis on a very distinct ruling class and working class too. There is also a greater focus on growing the economy through international trade relationships rather than supporting local or national industry. As I mentioned, right and left are very broad terms. Naturally, there will be issues where we consider ourselves left-wing for some, but right-wing for others. Remember that we're talking about a spectrum here too, so while you'll hear people talk of far right and far left, which would be taking a hardline liberal or hardline conservative approach, you can also be more moderate in your leanings. Taking a centrist stance, for example, means having beliefs that belong somewhere in the middle between the two extremes. In Australian politics, we have two main parties, Liberal and Labor. Now listen carefully because this gets a little confusing. The Liberal Party, in spite of the term liberal, which denotes more progressive, leftist ideals, is actually Australia's Conservative Party. They favour moderate right ideas. It's the Labor Party who actually represent moderate left ideas. Moderate liberals tend to be closer to the philosophy of J.S. Mills, while those on the right are closer to those of Edmund Burke. Making this matter all the more complicated is the fact that within both parties, there are factions that are even more conservative or more progressive. Let's not forget that there are other significant parties in Australia's political landscape. We also have the Greens, who are typically more left-leaning than Labor, we could say far left, and are more socialistic in terms of their economic policy. They've also made a transition from campaigning on environmental issues to being far more social democratic. Towards the opposite end of the spectrum, you'll note the self-proclaimed Australian Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, who are reasonably far right. So, why does it matter where these parties sit on the political spectrum? Remember that you'll be completing your first assessment task this week, which asks you to reflect on which political party best aligns with your values. The policies each party brings to an election are dictated by their beliefs. We will be looking at these policies in class this week, and for many of you, the party that best aligns with your own values will no doubt be the ones that also reflect where you personally sit on this spectrum too.